In this video, we'll continue our feast of nouns by focusing exclusively on our various categories of abstract nouns. Joel's kitchen conveniently organizes our abstract nouns by various types. Some nouns tend to be preceded or followed by the word de. Others tend to be used along with certain verbs such as dar, tener, or hacer. Others are used along with en. And other abstract nouns are pretty simple and straightforward to apply. Let's go ahead and start with Joel's refrigerator, which stores our nouns that go along with the word de. The refrigerator is divided into two parts. We have the freezer on top, and then the main part of the refrigerator below. In the top, in the freezer, we've already learned verdad on the left and acuerdo on the right, both of which are commonly used after the word de, as in de verdad or de acuerdo. There are a few new things in the freezer today. Some pictures of Joel's dad's wings, a frozen tiny whale turning around, and then on the right, beside the picture of acuerdo, we have a picture of a letter H that looks like a helicopter landing pad. First of all, the tiny V's on the left represent the word veras. This is a lot like the word verdad. So the phrase de veras simply means really. This is basically a more casual version of de verdad. The whale turning around represents the word vuelta. The whale seems to be chasing its tail as if it wants to go back to where it was. Well, if it were alive, that is. It seems to be frozen in the middle of this redo action. So make sure you can picture a frozen whale in the freezer trying to turn around or chase its tail. The word vuelta, with a stress on whale, vuelta, means return, but its most common use is in the phrase de vuelta, which means once again. Specifically, the idiom de vuelta gives the sense that someone has returned to do something. For example, I want to go to Colombia again. We could translate that as quiero ir a Colombia otra vez. But native speakers are more likely to say quiero ir a Colombia de vuelta instead of otra vez, emphasizing this idea of returning. Meanwhile, the H on the right side is a bit funny. Joel has painted this here to represent the word hecho, which as a noun means fact or act. For example, un hecho can mean an act. But this word's most common use is in the idiom de hecho, which means in fact. For example, you could say, in fact, the policeman told him that. That would be, de hecho, el policía le dijo eso. Let's quickly practice using our freezer words with de before them. De verdad, de veras, de vuelta, de hecho, and de acuerdo. Below the freezer, in the refrigerator itself, are nouns that tend to have the word de after them rather than before them. The refrigerator is where Joel likes to do experiments on birds. He likes to put them in the refrigerator and see how long they can survive. Right now, there's a sparrow in the middle of the refrigerator that's been here for several weeks. It keeps asking Joel, how much longer do I have to wait in here? And Joel keeps telling it, just be patient and wait, little sparrow. You'll be in a better place soon. Just wait. The word espera means wait as a noun. For example, a wait would be una espera. More commonly, espera is followed by de when you're referring to what you're waiting for. Now also remember that Joel likes to use the preposition a to indicate moments in time. If you want to describe someone who is in a moment of waiting for something, or maybe even in line for something, you could say they are awaiting something in English, but in Spanish you would say they are a la espera, meaning in waiting. A la espera. To describe what they're waiting for, we would use de after that. For example, if you're waiting for food, you might say that you're a la espera de comida. Meanwhile, this sparrow trapped in Joel's refrigerator is shouting, Ayuda! What she's saying is, help! Joel, I thought you'd have helped me by now. Or chef, I thought at least you'd have helped me. The word ayuda means help. For example, the help of a friend would be la ayuda de un amigo. Below the bird is a sideways egg carton. Unfortunately, all of the eggs fell out of this carton, which makes Joel upset. Instead of having eggs, he only has a lack of eggs because they all fell out. The word falta, when you stress fal there, falta means lack. For example, a lack of food would be una falta de comida. Now, the word lack is not very common in modern English, but it is common in Spanish. This is because of the idiom le hace falta. So this means that something is missing for someone, or literally, it makes him or her a lack. Just practice saying le hace falta. Now, the thing that is making the lack isn't really anything in particular. You know how in English we say, it's raining. Well, what is it that's raining? Really nothing. So we say something makes someone a lack, or le hace falta. This idiom always takes an indirect object, le, les, te, me, nos, and so on. So here's a sentence example. It's missing a lot. Literally, for it makes lack a lot, or le hace falta mucho. In this case, we simply said that something is missing a lot, or mucho. If we replace that with a specific noun, we would be describing what is missing. Let's say, for example, you're not quite old enough to meet a requirement. A way to phrase this is, for me, it makes lack a couple of years. This would be, me hace falta a couple of años. If you want to say that someone is lacking food, you could say, le hace falta la comida. Now, if you want to say that nothing is missing, this is actually a pretty common idiom. No le hace falta nada. Literally, it isn't making fault nothing to it. No le hace falta nada. This is just an idiomatic way of saying that something has everything it needs. It's not missing anything. Now, of course, since falta is in the refrigerator, it can commonly be followed by de. For example, a lack of food could simply be una falta de comida. Let's look at some other words in the refrigerator that can be followed by de. The sparrow is always looking for ways to get out of the refrigerator. A formation of water vapor in the refrigerator gives her an idea. Maybe she can hide in this formed cloud of vapor, and when Joel opens the refrigerator and doesn't see her, she can burst out of it before he knows it. This would be a great way to get out. So remember the word form and way together here. This form of vapor would be a great way to get out. The word forma sounds like it should mean form, but more commonly it means way. So a way of doing it would be una forma de hacerlo. For example, there wasn't a way to do it would be no había forma de hacerlo. There's a synonym for the word forma. The form of vapor has come together into the shape of ner from the tener shop. So if you looked at this cloud of vapor, it would look a lot like Ner, the old man who makes toys. The word manera, with a stress on ner, means manner or way. So it's also common to say una manera de hacerlo, to say a way of doing it. Below this cloud of vapor on the refrigerator floor is a pair of spoons. The sparrow sees these as another opportunity to escape. Maybe if she tries to play a tune on the spoons, it will distract Joel for a moment and she'll be able to escape. Actually, this almost worked once. The bird clacked the spoons together, and Joel suddenly tuned out for a moment and said, "Oh, that tune reminds me of the tunes that my dad used to play." For a brief moment, the bird saw this as a great opportunity, but unfortunately, Joel collected himself and slammed the door. The sparrow missed her chance. The word oportunidad has a stress on that last syllable, dad, but the secondary stressed syllable is tune, oportunidad. Una oportunidad means an opportunity or a chance. For example, a chance of doing it would be una oportunidad de hacerlo. Now let's proceed beyond the refrigerator and go to the kitchen shelves or cabinets above the counters. In the cabinet with the idea light bulbs that we've seen before, or idea bulbs, as well as the razón sun, somebody has stuck gum all over one of the shelves. This made Joel extremely angry when he found out, and he said, "Gum in my kitchen? Whose fault is this?" At that moment, the chef made an enormous, guilty-sounding gulping noise. Gulp! In doing so, he swallowed the gum that he was chewing. When Joel heard that gulp, he immediately knew who was to blame. "It's your fault. The blame is yours." Joel's word for blame is culpa. For Joel, being guilty of something is the same as having the blame of something, or tener la culpa de algo. In a shelf on the right side, the chef has hung some aromatic tea bags, simply for the scent. The chef told Joel, "The scent of this tea helps me to cook better." Joel responded, "That doesn't make any sense." But then he smelled the beautiful aroma, and he changed his mind. "Okay, you're right," he said. "That makes sense." The word sentido, with a stress on T, but it starts with scent, sentido, means sense. For example, something that makes sense actually has sense in Spanish. For example, that makes sense is eso tiene sentido. These tea scent bags are held up by a minifigure of Dare from the Poder shop. This represents the word poder, which as a noun means power or ability. To have the power of doing something would be tener el poder of doing something. This figure of Dare is also holding a very thick, heavy notebook that says plan on it. P-L-A-N. This contains many plans that Joel has for making more money. The word plan is a cognate meaning plan. On a nearby shelf, also on the right side, above the problema hat, Joel has installed a steering wheel and a couple of levers. These so-called controls don't really do anything, but they give Joel comfort. He likes to feel like he has control. The word control is another cognate. Tener control means to have control. On the door of this cabinet, Joel has a big yellow sign that says, "Cuidado, wet paint." This direction is actually aimed at his dad. He's tired of his dad taking things from the cabinets, even though they're actually things that his dad had lent to him in the first place. Joel is trying to scare his dad away, and his word for carefulness has the stress syllable dad, cuidado. The idiom for being careful is tener cuidado, literally having carefulness. You should practice going through these shelves using the verb tener before each word. So let's use tener cuidado in our base sentence. One must be careful, or uno tiene que tener cuidado. We can change that to any of our other tener abstract nouns. One has to have control. Uno tiene que tener control. One has to have a plan. Uno tiene que tener un plan. One has to have the ability. Uno tiene que tener el poder. Practice using tener with all of the nouns on the shelves. Right below the shelves, there's a little space of wall above Joel's counter. Things written into the kitchen wall represent nouns that are commonly combined with the verb dar. On the left side, Joel has decorated this tiny patch of wall with some Christmas lights, and they're shaped like another whale. Just like the whale in the refrigerator, this whale seems to be turning around backwards. This represents the word vuelta, which in this case means turn. It may seem strange that the word for turn is used with dar, but that's normal in Spanish. Instead of making a turn, as we do in English, you always give a turn, or dar una vuelta. Actually, una vuelta can also idiomatically mean a walk, as well as a turn, even though whales can't walk. So be prepared to see it used in both ways. Next to the whale, there's a coin leaning against the wall with a list of prices on it. One of the funny things about Yol is that most of the money is in bills, but itemized lists of money, such as account summaries, are written down on metal coins. In the case of the one that we're looking at here in the kitchen, Joel has taken money from various investors, and their account information is on this coin. The word cuenta, which sounds kind of like cuenta, but it's cuenta, means account. Cuenta is an important word mainly because it's used in some common idioms, particularly along with the verb dar, as we'll see in just a minute. But let's cover one more word first. On the right wall below the shelves, Joel and his chef don't use recipes. Instead, they use 3 simple steps that they've written here for every single meal. These 3 steps are written on the wall above the counter, and Joel likes to talk about passing over each step. Whenever he completes a step, he says, "Okay, we passed that step, now pass on to the next one." His word for step is paso. All 3 of these nouns on the wall are associated with dar, or to give, and this requires some explanation. First, note that Joel doesn't like walking very much. He prefers to fly. Anytime he actually has to take steps with his feet, he feels like he's giving something because it's so much effort. In English, we say that someone takes a step, but in Spanish, it's always give a step, or dar un paso. And then, as described earlier, Joel never takes a walk, he always gives a turn instead, dar una vuelta. For example, they went to take a walk would be fueron a dar una vuelta. We went to take a few steps backwards would be fuimos a dar unos pasos atrás. Okay, so that covers paso and vuelta. But what is the cuenta doing here on the wall? When do you give account? And is that very common? Well, yes, but not in the way that you might expect. Cuenta is usually something that you give yourself. When you give yourself account of something, you're realizing something. That's the idiom. This may seem really complicated, but you'll hear native speakers use it all the time. So the idiom to memorize is darse cuenta de algo. Give yourself account of something. Darse cuenta de algo. For example, I realized that there wasn't anyone would be me di cuenta. Literally, I gave myself account. Me di cuenta de que no había nadie. So normally cuenta in these situations is followed by de que. She realized that the thing was nice. Se dio cuenta de que la cosa era buena. Do you realize that I have it? ¿Te das cuenta de que yo lo tengo? They realized that there was a new person in the city. Se dieron cuenta de que había una nueva persona in the city. On the counter just below this wall, we've seen some things that Joel can do. For example, I do the work is hago el trabajo. He did me a favor is me hizo un favor. You might be surprised at some of the other things that Joel can do or make. He can make a deal, he can make a question, and in some cases he can make case. This may seem odd because, for example, in English we don't make a question, we ask a question. But Joel uses the verb hacer with everything we're about to learn on the counter. On the left side of the counter, near the cuenta, are a bunch of tiny goons. These goons are all carrying clubs. They keep asking Joel some very difficult questions. In particular, one of Joel's investors is apparently very suspicious about how Joel is using his money. He's sent his goons to find out if it's true that Joel wasted 10,000 yen on a robot pony when he agreed to use that money to start a business. Joel thinks that the questions that these goons pose are very uncomfortable. In general, Joel refers to a question as a pregunta. To the right, we have a stove on this counter. Here we find Joel's tiny animatronic pony, which trots around happily. It's carrying a suitcase. This was part of a deal that he made with the chef. The chef didn't want Joel's romping toy in the kitchen because of the clip-clop of its hooves, which is very distracting for a cook. But Joel agreed only to let it trot around on the stove to avoid leaving black hoof prints on the nice green counter. This deal that they made is referred to as the trato, with a stress on trot, trato. Note that although the word trato generally means deal, it can also be used to mean treatment in some cases. Joel insists that his robot pony must be treated very gently and carefully. For example, a stove burner should not be lit when the pony is on top of it. But why is the pony carrying around a suitcase? This is full of the papers that Joel has prepared for his lawyers. He's drawn up an entire case for why he should be allowed to have a toy-trotting pony in the kitchen and why this is a good business investment. The word caso means case. This is used in a variety of ways. Again, the nouns on the counter tend to be associated with the verb hacer. But note that the cuenta is leaning against the wall, so it seems to be both on the wall for use with dar and on the counter for use with hacer. So there's an idiom with cuenta that uses hacer, as well as the darse cuenta idiom that we just learned earlier. The idiom uses a de in between, hacer de cuenta. So remember that phrase, hacer de cuenta. This means to pretend, literally to make of account, but it's used to mean pretend. It tends to be followed by que, and then the sentence that you're pretending. Here's an example. They're pretending that they're brothers. Hacen de cuenta que son hermanos. Let's pretend that these two are friends. Hagamos de cuenta que estos dos son amigos. The word trato can mean treatment, but when associated with hacer, it means deal. For example, let's make a deal. Hagamos un trato. The word caso can be used without hacer to mean case in pretty much any way you would use the abstract word case in English. For example, in that case, she wouldn't do it. En ese caso, no lo haría. But when caso is used along with hacer, it has to do with obedience. The idiom hacerle caso, literally to do him case, means to listen to or to obey. For example, let's say he's listening to the policeman or he obeys the policeman. This would be le hace caso al policía. To ask, do you obey your mom? That would be le haces caso a tu mamá? Now let's go over to the island. We've learned cosas on top of the island, but let's go inside the island for a moment. This is where we encounter a couple of nouns that usually have the word en before them. There's a tiny pathway through the island leading from a large doorway on one side to a minuscule doorway on the other side. This is a prank that Joel plays on guests. He has them start walking down the path, but then it gets smaller and smaller, and they aren't able to fit through the tiny door at the other end. They always end up saying, "That's so mean. This isn't a real path, and it doesn't go anywhere." The word camino, with a stress on mean, camino, means path, route, or way. For example, on the way would be en el camino. To the left, Joel keeps a virtual reality headset that he lets his guests play with. He only does this so that they won't bother him, especially his dad, who loves virtual reality but also likes messing with the things in Joel's kitchen. The word realidad sounds a lot like reality, and that's exactly what it means, but it has a stress on dad. Realidad. To say in reality, you would say en realidad. We've already stored dozens of abstract nouns in various places in the kitchen, depending on what words they tend to be used with. But on top of the island, in the middle, we store more general abstract words like cosa that are commonly used in a variety of ways. These tend to be very straightforward labels. There's a window in the top of the island that looks down on anyone inside the island. This window gives Joel a very nice view of what anyone is doing in there, whether playing with the virtual reality headset or walking down the mean Camino. Joel always feels very important when he looks out a window down at anyone or anything below him. He calls the view a Vista because he thinks that this is a grand kind of word and it makes him feel special. But Joel wants this Vista to be reserved for him only and protected from anyone else. In order to keep it safe, he's surrounded the window with things that look like insect wings just for security. These wings remind him of the security that his own dad used to make him feel as a child, and his word for security is seguridad. To help prevent people from trying to hop over the wings of seguridad, he's posted some interesting items around that he hopes will distract people. One says, "Word lab, danger. Do not enter. Words are being invented here." Joel has been told that words are very dangerous and that laboratories are very dangerous, so he thought that this would be a nice combo way to scare people away, words and laboratories. His word for word is palabra, with a stress on lab. Palabra. The second thing that he's posted around the seguridad wings is simply a long list. It says, lista. Read this list before proceeding. Joel's word for list is lista. But the third and most strange thing that he's posted is a wanted poster. It says, "Wanted, Gary." Apparently, Gary is a bad guy who is wanted for starting a war. The reward is 1 million yen, so of course this interests guests greatly. They don't realize that this is a fiction that Joel made up. But now it's even confused Joel. Every time he thinks of a war, he calls it a guerra. On the right side of the counter, there's a record player that has a drawing of Joel and the chef, just like in the freezer. This is a recording of a funny conversation between Joel and the chef, where they had an argument and Joel actually won the argument, mostly because he threatened to kick the chef out of the house. Joel is obsessed with this memory, and he listens to it over and over. His word for memory is recuerdo. For example, a memory would be un recuerdo. Partly underneath the record player is a powdered wig. This is for a game that Joel likes to play. He puts the wig on different people and laughs at them. Anytime a guest expresses interest in playing a game, Joel says, "Oh yes, we can play a game," and then subjects them to this embarrassment. Since this is the only game that Joel really knows how to play, he calls every game a juego. So juego is spelled Juego, but it stresses wig. Juego. We've learned a lot of nouns in this video, and many of these are tricky to use like a native speaker. It's important to make sure that you not only know these words, but you're able to use them effectively in phrases such as me di cuenta, or hagamos de cuenta, or tiene sentido.